Welcome everyone to the channel. In this video, we are going to delve into the story of 3 real disappearance cases that you won't believe. In 1979, Andreas, a young Austrian bricklayer apprentice, lived through an experience that would challenge the limits of human survival. After a minor car accident, Andreas found himself detained, handcuffed, and forgotten in a dark cell in the basement of a police station. The imprisonment was not only physical but also psychological. Without food, without water, and without any help, he found himself immersed in a desperate fight for his life. In the first few days, absolute silence was his only companion. The lack of light and the cold of the isolated cell in a deep basement began to consume his sanity, but what seemed to be an endless abyss became his motivation to fight. Time, like an invisible enemy, began to accelerate as the days passed. Every moment became a test of endurance, and he knew that his only chance of survival would be to cling to the human instinct to persevere. Over the 18 days he was left there, Andreas went through a true mental transformation, where despair mixed with hope, until finally, he faced the possibility of death with unshakable determination. What he didn't know was that, as time passed, his body began to change. Without water, his body was forced to adapt to extreme conditions. Dehydration was slow but merciless. His organs began to fail one by one, but his survival instinct seemed to give him an inexplicable strength, keeping him alive. His mind became his greatest ally, as it began to create defense mechanisms. He disconnected from pain, facing each day as an eternity. On April 19, almost 3 weeks later, a police officer went down to the basement for unrelated business. And while it's not known exactly why he went there, the officer didn't even get to what was originally there before being hit by an unholy stench. It wasn't the unmistakable smell of death, but it certainly wasn't pleasant, and it was strong enough for him to search for whatever was causing it. The officer then began to look around the basement as he approached this small holding cell. This was undeniably the source, but it didn't make sense. No one should be occupying the cell, and even if they were, it seemed too strong to be someone being held in there. The officer then took his keys, found the right one, and slid it into the lock, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found when the cell door opened. There on the floor was Andreas, completely emaciated and barely clinging to life. This was an impossible find. The police had absolutely no record of anyone being held in the basement cell, so whoever put him there simply and tragically forgot about him. So, for 18 days, Andreas suffered alone in the cell, without food or water, and in total darkness. His condition was extremely weak, but Andreas' survival story was immediately recognized as a miracle. His name was recorded in history as a symbol of human endurance, becoming an emblem of mental strength and perseverance. Although scientific explanations suggested that he had reached the limits of human endurance, the mystery still remains. How did he manage to survive? Was it the extraordinary capacity of the human body to deal with the lack of water, or a force that goes beyond the physical? The question persists: what makes us capable of resisting when everything around us says we can't go on? For Andreas, it was a mix of primal instinct and an extraordinary mental strength that defied logic, showing that the human mind can be just as powerful as the body. His survival became an example not only of endurance but also of mental overcoming in impossible conditions. The case of Andreas questions how far we can go, as human beings, when all we have left is our will to live. True human strength lies not only in surviving, but in enduring the impossible. In 1986, the young Canadian Edgar mysteriously disappeared after buying a bus ticket to the famous Niagara Falls. A simple travel ticket turned into one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. That morning, Edgar simply vanished without a trace. His family, in despair, searched for him for years, but police investigations came to a standstill. Edgar seemed to have disappeared from the map, without any logical explanation for his disappearance. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a void of uncertainty. What no one knew at the time was that Edgar was actually far from where everyone was searching. He was alive, but he didn't remember who he was or where he came from. Edgar had suffered a severe head injury during his disappearance, and retrograde amnesia took over his memory, erasing everything he knew about his previous life. He had created a new identity in a distant city, about 80 miles from where it had all happened. For him, the past became an enigma and a vague memory, while he tried to live his life under a different name, in a place that seemed to be the start of a new beginning. Over the years, Edgar settled into the new city, living under a false identity. He met new people, made new friends, and built a new life. But at the same time, the truth about his past haunted him. He didn't remember how he got there, but he felt that something was incomplete, something was missing in his life. For years, He tried to adapt to his new identity, but the mystery about his disappearance continued to echo in his mind. Until finally, after 30 years, Edgar's story took an unexpected turn. The discovery of Edgar was a shock both for him and for the family that had long considered him lost. A private detective, investigating cold cases of old disappearances, came across his name on a list of missing persons. When he was contacted, Edgar was surprised to learn that he was, in fact, part of one of the biggest cold cases in Canada. His amnesia had lasted 30 years, and the revelation of his true identity was an agonizing experience. He realized that what he believed to be his new beginning was, in fact, just a missing piece of his past. While the world searched for him, he was living his life in a distant city, unaware of who he really was. Edgar's story is a lesson about identity, memory, and the power of the mind to erase and rebuild reality. His case became one of the greatest examples of how the loss of identity can change the entire course of a person's life. The mystery of Edgar remained unsolved for 3 decades, until he himself resolved his own cold case. Edgar's story questions what truly makes us who we are. How is our identity formed? What happens when that identity disappears? And above all, what does it take to rebuild a life when the past vanishes? It is a story of self-discovery, of a man trying to understand who he really was after having been missing for so long. In 1998, the young Australian Natasha, only 16 years old, mysteriously disappeared. Her family, desperate, believed she had become another victim of the feared serial killer Leonard Fraser, who terrorized the region at the time. Natasha had last been seen leaving home for school but was never seen again. For years, her disappearance was one of the most intriguing and terrifying cases in Australia, with suspicions that she had been kidnapped and murdered by Fraser, who was then serving time for a series of violent crimes. The case seemed like an unsolvable tragedy, until 5 years later, an unexpected twist completely changed the investigation. In 2003, Natasha was found alive, but what made her story even more incredible was the fact that she had been hiding only 4 kilometers from her home. When she was rescued, Natasha revealed that she had run away from her life and from school, hiding in her boyfriend's closet, a choice that seemed incomprehensible to everyone, given that she had been presumed dead. During the years she was missing, Natasha remained silent, away from her family, not wanting to be found. What seemed to be a case of a brutal crime turned out to be the story of a teenager fleeing something much deeper and more personal: fear, pressure, and a family life she could no longer bear. The discovery of Natasha caused a mixture of relief and confusion. When found, she explained that she had been escaping an unbearable life, marked by family pressure and constant academic stress. Her disappearance not only brought a massive twist to the investigation but also raised questions about society's judgment of a young woman's motives in such an extreme situation. Society quickly began to question what had really happened to Natasha and why she had lied about her death. Instead of being the victim of a criminal, as everyone had imagined, she was the protagonist of a story of escape and survival. Her life of hiding and lies, though incomprehensible to many, was a desperate response to a situation she could no longer control. But what no one expected was the legal twist that followed. When Natasha was rescued, the authorities began to revisit the case of Leonard Fraser, the serial killer who had been considered the prime suspect in Natasha's disappearance. During the trial, the revelation that Natasha was alive and had run away on her own led to Fraser's acquittal. What seemed to be the resolution of a terrifying mystery turned into a dramatic outcome, where doubts about his innocence sparked heated debate about the truth of the events. Natasha's story not only challenged expectations about what might have happened to her but also questioned the public's perception of a young woman's motives in a complex situation. The case of Natasha is a powerful reminder that not everything is as it seems. Sometimes, what begins as a story of a criminal's victim turns into a narrative of self-discovery and resistance to invisible pressures. The real twist is not in the person who was considered guilty, but in understanding that human motivations can be far more complex than a simple label of victimhood. Natasha left us a lesson on how easy it is to judge a case without understanding the emotional depths behind it. Her escape, in fact, became the key to unraveling the true mystery behind her disappearance. And in the end, she showed that sometimes the real enemy is not what's in front of us, but what's within ourselves. Did you enjoy this story? Then leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos.